Hey, Wheelchair Gunfighter here. This is part 5 of functional technique building. Just a reminder, this is not a series about demonstrating a bunch of techniques. It is the full process for developing your own techniques, the principles, what you're trying to accomplish, the injuries that you're trying to incur or you're trying to deliver to stop a threat. With a bunch of different things. We talked about how to deliver injury with strikes effectively, what targets you're aiming for to break things on your opponent. We talked about doing it with joints, which we really like to do because hand-to-hand wise, it's the most mechanical stuff that you're going to get. Mechanical incapacitation is the most instantaneous. So this video is going to be what happens when you add weapons into the mix. And primarily knives and firearms. Firearms, maybe a little bit of clubs. And why that is because if you can help it, you're applying hand-to-hand techniques so that you can get to a tool. And then you want to include stuff like guns because a lot of these times how you do your hand-to-hand technique is setting you up so that you can get to your pistol or put you in a good position where you can get accurate rounds on. So it's all relevant. So again, our priorities are trying to create a mechanically incapacitating injury on our opponent who's trying to do damage to us. We'll start with knives as far as how that concept expands. Now, with hand-to-hand, you have 2 points of contact that you can apply most of the time to something. So joints are really the most effective thing you can do. That's how you're going to affect the skeletal structure, is going for the pieces of the skeleton fit together, the joints, connective tissue. It's the weak point. However, when you introduce knives, and this is a Hisatsu trainer. It was a real Hisatsu, but we ground the edge completely off because I was getting tired of the little aluminum ones being too light to be functional. It just flies out of your hand. I don't know why a lighter one is harder one to hold on to, but it is. So, knives. So, you're talking about affecting the skeletal structure. The concept expands significantly when you add an edged weapon in there. The reason being, you can now start cutting at major muscle groups and where those major muscle groups attach themselves to bone. So you're affecting the skeletal structure, but it's not by attacking the skeleton, but by its locomotion system via the muscles. So this is what these are the targets that we're trying to attack. Now something to bear in mind too is that with knives, it's considered deadly force, but you don't have to kill someone with a knife. You don't have to apply lethal force. You can apply selective injury. And what I mean by that, you can well-placed attacks to the deltoid complex, right, the shoulder area, attacking these muscles. Their arms are now ineffective. The vast majority of their weapons, their ability to attack you, is now gone without attacking the arteries or anything like that. You know, they bleed a little bit, but they can have corrective surgery and probably use their arms again. You didn't have to kill somebody. You don't have to explain to somebody why you applied deadly force with a knife in a certain situation when you didn't have to. It gives you more options in a lot of circumstances. So knives are still very relevant to self-defense today if you take them seriously. Now here's what we're looking at target-wise. So you're talking about what's going to present itself here. What are the major muscle groups that we're going to be attacking? Okay, we're talking about where those muscles connect. Anywhere on the inside of the arm, you're going to get a lot. If you're talking about a lot of these places, you're going to get arterial or venous bleeding. But mostly, I'm going to attack if he's taking a swing at me with a weapon, and I can attack the inside of the wrist as I slip this attack. If it's talking about like a tire iron or something, yes, I'm going to get a lot of bleeding, but I'm mostly going after the tendons right here. So his ability to grasp is now gone. There goes that weapon. Now he still has the arm to attack me with, so that's not the best thing. Just like the joint breaks, I want to go as high up as I can to affect everything below it. So the same thing, I can attack higher up, right here at where the elbow is, where the bicep connects, and I'm getting the same thing. And of course you can get that with the bicep. The thing is too about slashing weapons, particularly if there's a shirt involved, a shirt offers quite a bit of armor against slashing techniques. So you're really looking for bare skin where you can get it. That's where you're going to get a good cut. And you're not going to get a good cut with small knives. This is a relatively large knife compared to something you would carry in your body. So with small knives, slashes are okay, but you have to be you really want to get the most out of it. So just slashing wildly, you're not going to get a lot out. There's a lot protecting important stuff. You have bones and you have the rib cage and all kinds of stuff. So if you carry a small pocket knife, think about what you can do with that blade length. And that's a lot of times it's going to be stabbing. So it's going to be, as that attack comes in, it might be a stab to that same spot. You got to be precise, but that's something that you're looking at. Maybe if I can get in right here at the shoulder, that complex in here with the deltoid complex, where all that stuff fits together. This can also be a good shot down into the collarbone. So you're not necessarily thinking about penetration, but also this is a concentrated, this is where a lot of force is concentrated. So attacking bones can be really effective in this case if you have a really strong knife. Probably a fixed blade. Okay, so yes, so we have mechanical stuff. We'll just run through all the mechanical stuff first. All right, so another target would be back here, and where the trap is, so a stab into this general area, and that's going to affect his ability to do this. It's also where the nerves that control the arm run down. So if I can get into the trapezius, that could have a total mechanical effect on the arm. If I'm not trying to do I'm not trying to do have a lethal effect with this knife, though. This is not a good target because of so many things that can accidentally happen. Backing up, so just purely mechanically speaking, arm, leg. So for the leg, you're talking about the Achilles tendon. So stick your foot up here, please. So you're about Achilles tendon back here that causes the foot to paddle forward. That's going to make him lose control over his foot. There's a nerve that controls the flexing of the foot that runs down the front of the shin, pretty much right where the middle of the shin is and lower. So a slash there will hit that nerve and will do essentially a lot of the same stuff that attacking the Achilles tendon will do. Back of the knee, you're talking about where the hamstrings connect to the tibia, or down to the lower bones in the leg. So that's going to keep him from being able to contract his leg. Now for someone to stand up, you have to have, you're applying counter pressure with both one muscle group against the other. You're creating isometric pressure, or isometric tension. So if you you take away the ability for tension to be applied on one side, then the whole structure falls down. So it really doesn't matter if I'm attacking at the front, at the thigh with that major muscle group, particularly at the top of the knee where the muscles connect. Because the meat, stabbing at the meat of the muscle is not going to get the whole muscle. It's going to apply some damage. But I want to get where that stuff is concentrated, where it's leveraging on the bone, which is where the tendons connect to the skeletal structure. So think the top of the leg, back of the leg. The Spartans had a particular technique where they would take their knife and run it up between the legs into the groin. Now, some people thought that this was psychological in nature for obvious reasons, but it's really not. The femoral artery runs right on the inside of the fold of the top of the thigh, so that's an arterial cut, as well as I think it's the transfemoral nerve, is the nerve that runs down and controls a lot of the leg. Severing of that nerve means that person can't stand up. Same is true of the sciatic nerve, which runs right underneath the fold of the buttocks in the back. So coming around the back, if that's all you've got, can get you. The sciatic nerve is the largest nerve in the body. So attacking either one of those nerves affecting the legs, that person not going to be able to stand. If they can't stand, they can't chase after you. That doesn't affect whether they have a gun or a knife, but that'll give us a significant advantage combined with other things. Systemic stuff with a knife. Obviously, the arterial cuts, that's going to be systemic in nature. You're going to have major bleeding. If we get tied up, and I can get underneath the arm, that's the brachial artery. And then the neck is a lot of obvious stuff. Okay, all kinds of soft stuff, airway. Now, what I meant by be careful about the trap, about not being a good target if you're not trying to do lethal force, which you're talking about a knife, so we're in that realm. Right behind the collarbone and between the trap is what we call the golden triangle. It makes a triangle shape between the neck, the trap, and the collarbone. Putting a knife behind that collarbone is easy access down into the vital organs. It's also the subclavian artery and other stuff. So getting a knife down in there is a very effective target for all kinds of reasons. Bleeding and mechanical. Mechanical being I now have a handle on his torso, and I can do stuff like take him down or other things. I can control his torso. Okay? More psychological stuff. You're talking about where you're going to cause bleeding down in the eyes. We're not going to worry about a whole lot about that. I want to focus on mechanical stuff that's mechanical in nature. Now, when you move up to something like the handgun, we're talking about the handgun and how you present it. Handgun bullets are not going to affect the skeletal structure reliably on an adult male or an adult period. They're just not effective enough. You talk about angles and all that. If you're lucky, a bullet will have a positive effect on the bone, but it's not something you can aim for. Rifle round, sure, but that's not something that's good. If it was reliable, we would have a lot of stuff where a tactic would be solely shooting into the pelvic girdle and aiming for the femoral, the femurs. So I mean, because that's what would cause someone to drop. But because it's not reliable, that's why we don't do that. When we're talking about handgun, the mechanics of the mechanism of handgun injury, you're talking about systemic only, because you're talking about a pinpoint type of damage going in. The expanding wound cavity stuff you see on YouTube is temporary. You're just talking about a thin drilled hole with a handgun round. Talking about, so the only stuff that's going to be able to affect it, that's sensitive enough to shut down when it has that kind of damage, are organs. Talking about lungs, heart, maybe the central nervous system, if you can affect it, if you can get deep enough to affect it. But that's what we're aiming for. That's what's going to cause the fastest damage with a handgun. Handgun damage or handgun bullet damage is not instantaneous most of the time. So just bear that in mind. That's why we shoot center mass with a handgun. We don't shoot something mechanical because it's not reliable and it's much harder to shoot something aiming for a bone or an arm or a leg. Now, talking about something that's hard, something more like a club. Okay. You're really talking about any bone that you're really talking about anything. You're talking about joints, you're talking about bones, the skull, anywhere where you can get a solid shot. It doesn't really matter where you hit. You can attack anywhere on the skeletal structure and you're going to really get a really positive effect as long as you have decent power behind the strike. So, clubs, skeletal structure all day long. Knives, you're talking about major muscle groups where you're going to get the most benefit the fastest, because bones is going to be a harder thing to hit. Maybe if you have some skill, maybe some systemic stuff, but the fastest stuff is going to be mechanical in nature. Handgun stuff, you just don't have the ability to apply mechanical injury reliably. Maybe by accident, but definitely not intentionally, not reliably every time. So handgun, that's why we aim for center of mass, because the only type of injury that's going to cause incapacitation by that handgun round is to the system. So this has all been mechanisms of injury. This all is going to come back into various techniques, how hand-to-hand blends into the use of a weapon as we get to our weapon. Multiple attackers, you're talking about a higher level of efficiency and all that. It's going to all roll together, but you have to keep all this in mind. This is what you're targeting. So we go back to opportunity and target prioritization. This is what you're aiming for. Pick the stuff that's going to give you the most benefit. Don't aim for stuff don't target stuff that's not going to achieve your goal of incapacitation. So this has been the next video in functional technique building. We're going to go through the entire process, beginning to end. So please like, subscribe, comment, email me, wheelchairgunfighter@gmail.com.